A shattered teapot lies in pieces on the drawing-room floor, its porcelain shards whispering secrets of foul play in the quaint village of St. Mary Mead. Who could have broken it? And why does it point to murder? Welcome to the story of Miss Marple's riddle of the broken teapot. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and let the mystery unfold. If you're enjoying the tale, hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to us. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Visitor in the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, where the days drifted by like lazy clouds over the English countryside. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy cottage, knitting a soft pink scarf, while gazing out at her well-tended garden. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming roses, and the only sounds were the distant chirp of birds and the gentle tick-tock of her grandfather clock. Miss Marple, with her sharp eyes hidden behind spectacles and her mind as keen as a detective's blade, had seen her share of village dramas, petty thefts, whispered scandals, and the occasional heated argument over a misplaced fence post. But nothing prepared her for the knock that came that fateful afternoon. The door rapped sharply 3 times, breaking the tranquility like a stone thrown into a still pond. Miss Marple set down her knitting needles and rose slowly, her frail frame belying the strength of her curiosity. She opened the door to find a young woman standing there, her face pale and drawn, clutching a small handbag as if it were a lifeline. The visitor was dressed in a simple wool coat, damp from the light drizzle outside, and her eyes darted nervously, scanning the quiet street behind her. "Good afternoon," Miss Marple said warmly, her voice steady and inviting. "You look as though you've had quite a journey. Do come in out of the rain, my dear." The woman hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, her shoes leaving faint muddy prints on the doormat. "Thank you, Miss Marple," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm Eliza Hawthorne. I've heard so much about you from the villagers. How you've helped solve those little mysteries around here. I didn't know where else to turn." Miss Marple led Eliza into the sitting room, where a fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the chintz armchairs and the collection of delicate china teacups on the sideboard. She gestured for Eliza to sit and busied herself preparing tea, knowing that a hot cup often loosened tongues and eased worries. As the kettle whistled, Miss Marple observed her guest closely. The way Eliza's fingers twisted the strap of her handbag, the subtle quiver in her lip. This was no ordinary social call. Something dark lurked beneath the surface. Once settled with steaming cups in hand, Eliza began her tale. "It started 2 weeks ago at Hawthorne Manor, up on the hill. My uncle, Sir Reginald Hawthorne, hosted a small gathering for tea. Just family and a few close friends. My cousin Bertram, the village doctor Mr. Hargrove, and the new curate, Reverend Mills. It was meant to be a pleasant afternoon, discussing the upcoming church fete and sharing stories. But then the teapot broke." Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. Her knitting resumed in her lap as she listened intently. "A broken teapot? That sounds unfortunate, but hardly sinister. Accidents happen, especially with old china." Eliza shook her head vigorously, her eyes wide. "No, you don't understand. It wasn't just any teapot. It was an antique, a family heirloom passed down from my great-grandmother. Solid porcelain, never a crack in all these years. And it didn't just fall. It shattered right in the middle of the table, as if struck by an invisible force. Tea spilled everywhere, soaking the linens, and shards flew like daggers. Sir Reginald clutched his chest and collapsed moments later. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but I saw the fear in his eyes before he fell. He whispered something about a riddle and betrayal." Intrigued, Miss Marple leaned forward. "Tell me more about the gathering. Who was seated where? What was said just before the incident?" Eliza took a sip of tea, steadying herself. Sir Reginald was at the head of the table, pouring the tea himself as he always did, a bit of a ritual for him. Bertram was to his right, complaining about estate taxes. Mr. Hargrove sat opposite, chatting about herbal remedies, and Reverend Mills was next to me, quoting some Bible verse about hospitality. The teapot was in the center, filled with fresh Earl Grey. One moment it was whole, the next, crash, pieces everywhere. I picked up a shard later. It had a strange mark on it, like a deliberate scratch. Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully, her mind already piecing together possibilities. In her experience, village life was full of hidden motives. Jealousies over inheritances, old grudges simmering like unattended pots. And what happened after? Did anyone act oddly? Bertram rushed to call for help, but he seemed almost relieved. Mr. Hargrove pronounced Uncle dead on the spot. No autopsy needed since it looked natural. Reverend Mills prayed over the body, but his hands were shaking. And me, I was in shock. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the broken teapot was a clue, not an accident. Uncle was healthy as an ox. He walked miles every day. Why a heart attack then? As Eliza spoke, Miss Marple's thoughts raced. Teapots didn't shatter on their own unless tampered with. Perhaps a hidden flaw or sabotage. And the whisper of a riddle. That suggested something puzzling, a message left behind. She recalled a similar case years ago, involving a cracked vase that hid poison. But this felt different, more personal. "My dear," Miss Marple said gently, "you've done right coming to me. We'll get to the bottom of this. But first, let's think practically. Did your uncle have enemies? Any recent arguments?" Eliza pondered, then nodded. "He argued with Bertram about money. The estate is entailed, and Bertram stands to inherit. Mr. Hargrove prescribed him tonics, but Uncle disliked doctors. And the Reverend? They clashed over church donations. Uncle was stingy lately." Miss Marple made mental notes, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. Examples from past mysteries flooded her mind, like the time a broken clock revealed a timed alibi, or a shattered mirror exposing a thief's reflection. Here, the teapot might symbolize fragility in relationships, but practically, it could hold evidence. Residue of a substance that induced the attack, or a hidden note among the shards. As the afternoon light faded, Miss Marple wrapped up their chat with a reassuring smile. "Rest easy tonight, Eliza. Tomorrow we'll visit the manor and examine the scene ourselves. Little details often solve big puzzles." With that, Eliza left, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Miss Marple sat back, staring at the fire. The riddle had begun, and she sensed deeper layers waiting to unfold. Like why a teapot of all things? It teased at her mind, promising twists ahead. Chapter 2. Shadows at Hawthorne Manor. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling lawns of Hawthorne Manor, its ivy-clad walls looming like silent sentinels over the village of St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple, dressed in her sensible tweed coat and carrying a sturdy umbrella despite the clear sky, walked briskly up the gravel path with Eliza Hawthorne at her side. The manor's grandeur was undeniable. Tall windows glinting, stone gargoyles perched on the roof. But there was a stillness about the place, as if it held its breath, waiting for secrets to spill. Eliza unlocked the heavy oak door, and they stepped into a grand hall, its polished floor echoing underfoot. A chandelier hung above, its crystals dulled by dust, and portraits of stern-faced hawthorns stared down from the walls. Miss Marple's keen eyes scanned the space, noting the faint, musty smell, the slightly crooked rug, and a single glove abandoned on a side table. Small details, she knew, could unravel the tightest knots. They moved to the drawing room where the fateful tea party had occurred. The long mahogany table still stood, now cleared of its linens, but the air felt heavy, as if the memory of that day lingered. Eliza pointed to the center of the table. "That's where the teapot was," she said, her voice low. "It shattered right there." Miss Marple knelt, her joints protesting slightly, and examined the floor. A faint stain marked the wood, likely from the spilled tea, but no shards remained. "The pieces were cleared away?" she asked, straightening up. "Yes," Eliza replied. "The maid, Mrs. Baxter, swept them up the next day. She said it was a mess, Tea everywhere, and she didn't want anyone cutting themselves. The shards are in a box in the kitchen, if you want to see them. Miss Marple nodded, her mind already picturing the scene. Tea splashing, porcelain flying, and Sir Reginald's final gasp. They headed to the kitchen, a cavernous room with copper pots hanging like ornaments. Mrs. Baxter, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands, greeted them warily. "Didn't expect visitors," she muttered, wiping her hands on her apron. She fetched a small wooden box from a shelf and opened it to reveal jagged pieces of white porcelain, some still bearing traces of a delicate rose pattern. Miss Marple donned her spectacles and picked up a shard, turning it carefully in the light. There it was, the scratch Eliza had mentioned, a thin, deliberate line etched into the glaze, almost like a tiny arrow. "Curious," she murmured. "This isn't a natural crack. Someone marked it, perhaps to weaken it." She sifted through the pieces, finding a few more with similar scratches, all near the teapot's base. Her fingers paused on one shard with a faint brownish residue. Not tea, but something thicker, almost oily. "Mrs. Baxter," Miss Marple said, her tone mild but probing, "did you notice anything odd when you cleaned up? Anything left behind, perhaps, besides the teapot?" The maid's eyes flickered, and she busied herself adjusting a stack of plates. Nothing much, just the usual clutter, cups, saucers, a spilled sugar bowl, though there was a small vial, glass, about this big. She held her fingers an inch apart. "Found it under the table, thought it was for smelling salts or some such. Gave it to Mr. Bertram. He said he'd handle it." Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. A vial could mean medicine, perfume, or poison. "And where is Bertram now?" she asked. "Out in the stables," Eliza said. "He's been spending a lot of time there since, well, you know." They thanked Mrs. Baxter and stepped outside, crossing the dew-kissed grass toward the stables. The scent of hay and leather greeted them as they approached, and there was Bertram Hawthorne, brushing down a sleek chestnut horse. He was a tall man in his 30s, with sharp features and a restless energy, his tweed jacket stained with mud. He glanced up, his expression guarded. "Eliza, what's this about? Bringing Miss Marple here?" "I'm just trying to understand what happened," Eliza said firmly. "The teapot, Uncle's collapse. It doesn't add up." Bertram snorted, tossing the brush aside. "It adds up fine. Old man had a weak heart, and the teapot was old. Things break. People die. No need to stir up trouble." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes gentle but unyielding. "Perhaps. But tell me, Mr. Hawthorne, what was in that vial Mrs. Baxter found? The one you took?" Bertram froze, his hand mid-air, then laughed, a little too loudly. "Vial? Oh, that? Just some tonic Hargrove gave Uncle. Nothing important. Threw it out." His gaze darted to the horse, avoiding Miss Marple's steady stare. She made a mental note of his unease, the quick dismissal, the lie that hung in his words like a sour note. "Very well," she said lightly. "But I'd like to speak with Dr. Hargrove and Reverend Mills. They were there, after all. Might they shed light on this?" "Coincidence?" Bertram shrugged, turning back to the horse. "Suit yourself. Hargrove's at his surgery in the village, and the Reverend's likely at the church, praying or whatever he does." As they left the stables, Miss Marple's mind churned. The scratched teapot, the mysterious vial, Bertram's defensiveness. It was a puzzle with pieces that didn't yet fit. She glanced at Eliza, who looked both hopeful and anxious. "Don't worry, my dear," Miss Marple said. "We'll visit the doctor next. Truth has a way of hiding in plain sight, but it can't stay hidden forever." They turned toward the village, the manor's shadow stretching behind them, as if reluctant to let them go. The next piece of the riddle waited, and Miss Marple's instincts told her it was closer than anyone suspected. Chapter 3. The Doctor's Uneasy Silence. The village of St. Mary Mead bustled quietly under a pale autumn sky, with villagers nodding politely as Miss Marple and Eliza Hawthorne made their way down the cobbled street toward Dr. Hargrove's surgery. The small, whitewashed building stood at the edge of the village green, its sign creaking faintly in the breeze. Miss Marple's umbrella tapped rhythmically against the pavement, her mind turning over the scratched teapot shards and Bertram's evasive words about the vial. She sensed the threads of the mystery tightening, but the pattern remained elusive. Inside, the surgery smelled of antiseptic and old books, with shelves lined with medical journals and a worn desk cluttered with papers. Dr. Hargrove, a wiry man with greying hair and spectacles perched low on his nose, looked up from a patient's chart. His smile was polite but strained, as if he'd been expecting their visit and wasn't entirely pleased about it. "Miss Marple, Miss Hawthorne," he greeted, setting the chart aside. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Eliza spoke first, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "We're here about Uncle Reginald's death. The teapot breaking, his collapse. It's all so strange. You were there, Doctor. What did you see?" Dr. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles, his fingers lingering on the frames. "A sad affair, no doubt. Sir Reginald had a heart condition, you know. I'd warned him to avoid stress, but he was stubborn. The teapot breaking likely startled him, triggered the attack. Nothing more to it, I'm afraid." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes sharp behind her own glasses. "A heart condition?" Eliza mentioned he was quite active, walking miles daily. "That seems unusual for a man so frail." The doctor shifted in his chair, his gaze flicking to a drawer on his desk. "Well, yes, he was robust in some ways, but the heart is unpredictable. I examined him myself after he collapsed. No need for an autopsy, clear case of cardiac failure." His tone was firm, but his hands betrayed him, clasping tightly together. Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully, her knitting bag resting at her feet like a silent companion. "And this vial Mrs. Baxter found under the table. Bertram said it was one of your tonics. Could it have been something else?" Dr. Hargrove's face paled slightly, though he recovered quickly with a chuckle. "A tonic, yes, just a harmless herbal mix I prescribed for Sir Reginald's nerves. Peppermint and chamomile mostly. Nothing to cause a stir. Bertram must have misplaced it." His words were smooth, but Miss Marple caught the hesitation, the slight tremor in his voice. She recalled a village chemist years ago who'd mixed a harmless tonic that turned out to be laced with belladonna. Mistakes, or intentions, could hide in small bottles. "Might we see your records of Sir Reginald's prescriptions?" she asked mildly. Just to set Eliza's mind at ease, the doctor's smile faltered. "Records? Oh, they're in a bit of a jumble, I'm afraid. Busy practice, you know. But I assure you, it was all routine." He stood, gesturing toward the door. "I've patients waiting, so if there's nothing else—" Eliza's brow furrowed, but Miss Marple rose gracefully, her expression serene. "Of course, Doctor, we won't keep you. But might you recall anything else from that day? A word? A gesture? Anything out of the ordinary?" Dr. Hargrove paused, then shook his head. "It all happened so fast. The teapot shattered, tea spilled, and Sir Reginald gasped and fell. Reverend Mills prayed. Bertram ran for help, and I did what I could. A tragedy, plain and simple." As they stepped back into the crisp air, Miss Marple's mind buzzed. The doctor's reluctance to share records, his quick dismissal of the vial, it all pointed to something hidden. She glanced at Eliza, whose face was a mix of frustration and determination. "He's not telling us everything," Eliza whispered. "I could feel it." "Patience, my dear," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but firm. "People guard their secrets like treasures, but they always leave clues. Let's visit the church next. Reverend Mills may have seen something the others missed." They turned toward the spire of St. Mary's Church, its stone walls glowing softly in the sunlight. Miss Marple's thoughts lingered on the vial, its contents, its owner, its purpose. The riddle was growing more intricate, and she sensed the next piece was waiting in the shadow of the steeple. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Pews. The stone path to St. Mary's Church wound through a grove of yew trees, their dark branches casting flickering shadows on the ground as Miss Marple and Eliza approached. The church stood ancient and solemn, its weathered spire piercing the autumn sky. Inside, the air was cool, smelling of wax and old hymnals, with sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, painting the pews in hues of red and blue. Miss Marple's footsteps echoed softly as she moved forward, her eyes scanning the quiet sanctuary for Reverend Mills. They found him near the altar, arranging a modest bouquet of chrysanthemums for Sunday's service. The young curate, with his earnest face and slightly rumpled cassock, turned at their approach, his expression a mix of surprise and unease. "Miss Marple, Miss Hawthorne," he said, brushing pollen from his hands. "What brings you here today?" Eliza spoke up, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We're trying to understand what happened at the manor, Reverend. You were there when the teapot broke and my uncle collapsed. Did you notice anything strange?" Reverend Mills hesitated, his fingers lingering on a flower stem. "It was a dreadful day," he said softly. "Sir Reginald was pouring tea, speaking about the church fate, when the teapot shattered. It was so sudden, tea everywhere, and then he fell. I tried to comfort him, prayed over him, but he was gone." Miss Marple's keen gaze studied the curate's face, noting the way his eyes darted toward the altar, as if seeking solace. "You mentioned a Bible verse during the tea, I believe," she said, her tone gentle but probing. "Something about hospitality. Did anything else stand out before the incident? A look, perhaps, or a word?" The Reverend's hands trembled slightly, and he clasped them together. "I don't know if it matters, but Sir Reginald seemed distracted that day. He kept glancing at the teapot, almost as if he expected something to happen. And when it broke, he whispered something odd, not just riddle or betrayal, as Eliza heard, but also the key. I thought he meant the kingdom of heaven, given his state. But it stuck with me." Miss Marple's mind sharpened at the word key. A literal key, a metaphor, or something hidden in plain sight. She recalled a case where a dying man's word, lock, had pointed to a hidden compartment. "Did you see anyone touch the teapot before it broke?" she asked. Reverend Mills shook his head, but his brow furrowed. "No, Sir Reginald handled it himself, though I did notice Bertram pass him a sugar bowl just before. It seemed ordinary, but Bertram's hand lingered near the teapot, brushing it lightly. I thought nothing of it at the time." Eliza's eyes widened. "Bertram, are you sure?" "I could be mistaken," the Reverend said quickly, his cheeks flushing. "It was a fleeting moment, and I was focused on my tea, but the memory lingers, like a shadow I can't quite shake." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts weaving a new thread into the tapestry of the mystery. Bertram's proximity to the teapot, the strange scratches, the vial. Each clue pointed to deliberate action, not chance. She glanced at the altar, where a small brass cross gleamed. "And after the collapse, Reverend, what did you do?" "I stayed by Sir Reginald praying," he replied. "Dr. Hargrove took charge, and Bertram ran for help. I felt so helpless. Later, I helped Mrs. Baxter tidy the room, but I didn't touch the teapot shards. They seemed wrong somehow, like they held a curse." Miss Marple's lips curved slightly. Superstition often cloaked truth in village minds, but his unease suggested he'd seen more than he realized. "Thank you, Reverend," she said. "Your observations are most helpful. Might we speak again if other questions arise?" "Of course," he said, though his voice held a note of reluctance. "I only want peace for the family." As they stepped back into the sunlight, Eliza's face was taut with worry. Bertram touching the teapot, Uncle's whisper about a key. "What does it mean, Miss Marple?" "It means we're closer to the truth," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but resolute. "The pieces are falling into place, my dear. Let's return to the manor and look for this key, whatever form it takes." They walked back toward Hawthorne Manor, the church bells chiming softly behind them. Miss Marple's mind buzzed with possibilities, the riddle deepening with each step. The teapot's destruction was no accident, and the key, she sensed, would unlock more than just a door. Chapter 5. The Hidden Drawer. The late afternoon sun bathed Hawthorne Manor in a golden glow as Miss Marple and Eliza re-entered its grand hall. the air now tinged with the faint chill of approaching evening. The manor felt quieter than before, as if it were holding secrets in its shadowed corners. Miss Marple's mind buzzed with the Reverend's mention of the key and Bertram's suspicious brush near the teapot. Her eyes, sharp as ever, darted to the portraits lining the walls, their painted gazes seeming to follow her every step. Eliza led the way to Sir Reginald's study, a room tucked at the back of the manor, where he'd spent countless hours managing estate affairs. "If there's a key, literal or not, it might be here," Eliza said, pushing open the heavy door. The study was a haven of dark wood and leather, with bookshelves towering to the ceiling and a massive oak desk dominating the centre. Papers were neatly stacked, a fountain pen lay capped beside an inkwell, and a faint scent of tobacco lingered, as if Sir Reginald might walk in at any moment. Miss Marple approached the desk, her fingers brushing the polished surface. "Your uncle mentioned the key as he fell," she mused. "It could be a physical object, a code, or even a person. Let's start with the obvious." She began examining the desk, her hands moving methodically over drawers and edges, feeling for anything out of place. Eliza joined her, checking shelves and rifling through ledgers, her movements quick with nervous energy. As Miss Marple tugged at a stubborn drawer, she felt a slight resistance, not from a lock but from something catching inside. She knelt, peering closely, and noticed a faint seam along the drawer's base, almost invisible unless you knew to look. "Eliza, fetch a letter opener, would you?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with excitement. Eliza handed her a slim silver tool, and Miss Marple gently pried at the seam. With a soft click, a hidden panel sprang open, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside lay a small brass key, no larger than a thimble, with an ornate handle shaped like a rose. Beside it was a folded note, yellowed at the edges, bearing Sir Reginald's precise handwriting. Eliza gasped, leaning closer. "What does it say?" Miss Marple unfolded the note carefully and read aloud. "The rose guards the truth, but beware the thorn of betrayal." The words hung in the air, cryptic yet heavy with meaning. She turned the key over in her hand, noting its weight and craftsmanship. "This must open something important," she said. "A safe, perhaps, or a locked box." Eliza's eyes scanned the room. "There's a safe behind that painting," she said, pointing to a portrait of a stern-faced woman in a Victorian gown. They moved the frame aside, revealing a small iron safe embedded in the wall. Miss Marple inserted the key, and with a satisfying click, the door swung open. Inside were a few documents, estate deeds, a will, and a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with a rose. Miss Marple opened the journal, flipping to the final entry, dated the day of the tea party. Sir Reginald's handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. "Suspect foul play. The teapot is the key, scratched to break, but why? B grows impatient. H too eager to please. M hides behind piety. Must confront them before it's too late." Eliza's breath caught. "B.H.M. Bertram Hargrove and Mills. He suspected them all." "It seems so," Miss Marple replied, her mind racing. The journal confirmed her suspicions of sabotage, but the motive remained unclear. Was it money, revenge, or something deeper? She recalled a case where a hidden diary had exposed a blackmail scheme. Could this journal hold similar secrets? She closed the safe, slipping the key and journal into her bag. "We must be cautious, Eliza. Someone wanted your uncle's suspicions silenced, and they may still be watching. Let's keep this discovery quiet for now." Eliza nodded, her face pale but resolute. "What's next, Miss Marple?" "We need to understand the teapot's role," Miss Marple said. "Those scratches weren't random, and that residue I saw, it might tell us more. Let's find a chemist in the village to analyze it." As they left the study, the manor's shadows seemed to deepen, the air thick with unspoken questions. Miss Marple's thoughts swirled around the journal's cryptic words and the tiny key, each a piece of the growing puzzle. The truth was close, but the thorn of betrayal loomed ever nearer. Chapter 6. The Chemist's Clue. The village of St. Mary Mead was settling into the soft hush of early evening as Miss Marple and Eliza made their way to the chemist's shop, a quaint establishment nestled between the bakery and the post office. The shop's bell jingled as they entered, and the air filled with the sharp scent of herbs and chemicals. Behind the counter stood Mr. Pemberley, a bespectacled man with a meticulous demeanour, polishing a glass vial with a cloth. Miss Marple carried her knitting bag, the teapot shard with the strange residue carefully wrapped inside, alongside Sir Reginald's journal and the rose-shaped key. "Good evening, Mr. Pemberley," Miss Marple said, her voice warm but purposeful. "I wonder if you might help us with a small matter. We've a piece of porcelain from a broken teapot, and it bears an unusual mark, possibly a chemical residue. Could you analyse it?" Mr. Pemberley raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A teapot, you say? Odd request, but I'll take a look." Eliza handed him the shard, and he held it under a magnifying glass, his brow furrowing as he examined the oily brownish stain. "This isn't tea," he murmured. "It's thicker, almost like a resin. I'll need to run a test or two." He disappeared into a back room, where the clink of glass and hum of equipment soon followed. Miss Marple's eyes wandered the shop, noting shelves lined with bottles labelled in neat script. Camphor, laudanum, arsenic for rat poison. Her mind flashed to a case where a chemist's mislabelled bottle had caused a tragedy, and she wondered if this residue might point to something equally sinister. Eliza fidgeted beside her, her voice low. "Do you think the residue caused Uncle's collapse? Could it be poison?" "Patience, my dear," Miss Marple replied, her tone steady. "Let's see what Mr. Pemberley finds. But your uncle's journal suggested he suspected foul play, and this residue may be the thread that unravels it." After a few tense minutes, Mr. Pemberley returned, his face grave. "The residue is a compound called digitalis extract, derived from foxglove. It's used in small doses for heart conditions, but in excess, it's deadly. Causes the heart to seize, mimicking a natural attack. Whoever handled this teapot may have coated it with a concentrated dose, perhaps expecting it to mix with the tea." Eliza's hand flew to her mouth. "So someone did poison him?" Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her thoughts racing. Digitalis could explain Sir Reginald's sudden collapse, especially if ingested or even absorbed through a cut from a shard. The scratches on the teapot, designed to break it, might have ensured the poison reached its target. But who applied it? Bertram with his lingering hand, Hargrove with his tonics, or Mills hiding behind his prayers? "Did anyone come to you recently for digitalis?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but probing. Mr. Pemberley hesitated, then nodded. "Dr. Hargrove requested some last month, for a patient with a weak heart. Said it was for Sir Reginald, actually. I supplied a small vial, tightly sealed, but I've no record of anyone else asking for it. Not Bertram, not the Reverend." Miss Marple's mind clicked like her knitting needles. Hargrove's claim of a harmless tonic now seemed flimsier, especially with his reluctance to share records. But the vial found under the table, had it been Hargrove's, or had someone else obtained digitalis? She recalled a village scandal where a gardener had extracted foxglove from his own plants, and she wondered if the manor's gardens held such secrets. "Thank you, Mr. Pemberley," Miss Marple said, carefully rewrapping the shard. "This is most enlightening. Please keep this between us for now." As they stepped back into the cool evening air, Eliza's face was a mix of shock and determination. Hargrove lied about the tonic. "He must have known. Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her gaze distant. "But we mustn't leap to conclusions. The journal mentioned 3 suspects, and we've only scratched the surface. Let's revisit the manor's gardens tomorrow. Foxglove grows wild, and someone may have harvested it." The village lamps flickered to life as they walked back, the shadows lengthening around them. Miss Marple's thoughts swirled around the digitalis, the scratched teapot, and Sir Reginald's cryptic warning. The riddle was tightening, but the true culprit remained just out of reach. hidden in the folds of St. Mary Mead's quiet charm. Chapter 7. The Garden's Secret. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Hawthorne Manor, veiling the gardens in a ghostly haze as Miss Marple and Eliza stepped out into the dew-soaked grass. The air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and fading roses, but Miss Marple's focus was on the flower beds, where Foxglove might lurk among the blooms. Armed with Sir Reginald's journal, the rose-shaped key, and the chemist's revelation about digitalis, she felt the mystery's threads pulling tighter, though the pattern remained elusive. Eliza led the way to the garden's heart, where neatly trimmed hedges framed beds of late-season flowers. "Uncle loved these gardens," she said, her voice soft with memory. "He'd spend hours here, pruning and planting. If Foxglove grew, he'd have known." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes scanning the beds. Foxglove, with its tall spikes of bell-shaped flowers, was unmistakable, beautiful, but deadly. She moved carefully, her umbrella tapping the ground, until she spotted a cluster of plants tucked behind a row of lavender. Their purple blooms drooped slightly, and several stalks were missing, their bases cut cleanly with a blade. "Look here," Miss Marple said, kneeling to inspect the severed stems. "Someone harvested these recently. The cuts are fresh, no more than a week or two old." She straightened, her mind racing. Digitalis from these plants could have been distilled into the poison found on the Teapot shard, but by whom? Eliza's face tightened. Who would know how to use Foxglove like that? Dr. Hargrove, with his medical knowledge, or someone else? Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the journal's cryptic initials. B. H. M. Hargrove had access to digitalis, but Bertram or Reverend Mills could have learned the plant's properties. She recalled a village herbalist who'd once taught a curious boy to extract poisons for experiments. Knowledge, she knew, spread quietly in places like St. Mary Mead. "Let's check the gardener's shed," Miss Marple suggested. "Tools or traces might tell us who was here." The shed stood at the garden's edge, its wooden door weathered but sturdy. Inside, it smelled of peat and oil, with pruning shears, trowels, and sacks of fertilizer neatly arranged. Miss Marple's sharp eyes caught a glimmer on a workbench. A small glass bottle, half hidden under a rag, its stopper missing. She lifted it carefully, noting a faint brownish residue inside, similar to the teapot shard. Eliza gasped. "Is that the vial Mrs. Baxter found?" "No," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but firm. "That vial went to Bertram, and he claimed he discarded it. This is another, perhaps used to prepare the digitalis." She examined the workbench further, finding a pestle and mortar with traces of crushed leaves. Nearby, a pair of gardening gloves lay crumpled, one stained with the same brownish hue. "Someone was careless," Miss Marple murmured. "Or in a hurry." She wrapped the bottle in a handkerchief and tucked it into her bag. The gloves, she noted, were small. Too small for Bertram's hands, but perhaps fitting for Hargrove, or even the Reverend, or someone else entirely. Eliza's voice trembled. "This proves it, doesn't it? Someone poisoned Uncle deliberately." "It's strong evidence," Miss Marple agreed, "but we need motive and opportunity. Let's speak to the gardener. He might know who's been in this shed." They found Mr. Gibbs, the manor's elderly gardener, raking leaves near the greenhouse, his weathered face creased with surprise at their questions. "Foxglove?" "Aye. It grows out back, but I don't touch it. Nasty stuff if you're not careful. Haven't seen anyone near it, but I did notice the shed door ajar a few weeks ago, after that tea party. Thought I'd just forgotten to lock it." Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. An unlocked shed, a hidden bottle, and cut foxglove. Each clue pointed to premeditation. "Did you see Bertram, Dr. Hargrove, or Reverend Mills near the garden that day?" she asked. Mr. Gibbs scratched his chin. "Can't say for sure. Bertram's always about, checking the stables. Dr. Hargrove came by once, asking about medicinal herbs for his tonics. And the Reverend? Saw him walking the grounds, praying or some such, but he didn't go near the shed, far as I know." As they thanked Mr. Gibbs and turned back toward the manor, Miss Marple's mind churned. The bottle in the shed suggested someone close to the manor had prepared the poison, but the small gloves hinted at a new possibility. Perhaps a woman, or someone with delicate hands. The riddle was deepening, and the next step lay in confronting the suspects with these new clues. "We'll need to tread carefully," Miss Marple said to Eliza. "Let's invite Bertram, Hargrove and Mills to the manor tomorrow. A conversation might shake loose the truth." The garden's mist swirled around them as they walked away. The foxglove's silent presence, a reminder of the danger still lurking in St. Mary Mead. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The drawing room of Hawthorne Manor glowed softly under the chandelier's light, its polished table now bare, except for a simple tray of tea and biscuits. Miss Marple sat at one end, her knitting bag at her side, her calm demeanour masking the sharp anticipation in her eyes. Eliza stood by the window, her fingers twisting nervously as they awaited their guests. The plan was simple: invite Bertram, Dr. Hargrove, and Reverend Mills under the pretence of discussing Sir Reginald's memorial, then probe their reactions to the mounting evidence: the scratched teapot, the digitalis residue, the hidden bottle in the shed. The door creaked open, and Bertram entered first, his tall frame slouched slightly, his eyes narrowing as he saw Miss Marple. "What's this about, Eliza? I've got estate matters to handle," he said, dropping into a chair with a sigh. Dr. Hargrove followed, his spectacles glinting as he offered a tight smile, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Reverend Mills came last, his cassock pristine, but his face pale, as if the weight of the manor pressed on him. "Thank you for coming," Miss Marple began, her voice gentle but commanding attention. "We're here to honour Sir Reginald, but also to clarify the circumstances of his passing. The broken teapot, you see, raises questions that can't be ignored." Bertram scoffed, crossing his arms. "That old thing? It was brittle, bound to break. You're making a fuss over nothing." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled with quiet resolve. "Perhaps, but the teapot bore deliberate scratches designed to make it shatter, and a residue was found. Digitalis. A poison that can stop a heart. Curious, don't you think, for an ordinary tea party?" Dr. Hargrove's smile faltered, his fingers twitching. "Digitalis? I prescribed it for Sir Reginald's heart, as I told you. If it was on the teapot, perhaps it spilled from his tonic. A tragic accident." Reverend Mills shifted uncomfortably, his voice soft. "An accident, surely. Sir Reginald was under strain. The Lord calls us in his time." Miss Marple reached into her bag, producing the small glass bottle from the shed, its brownish residue catching the light. This was found in the gardener's shed, near foxglove plants with freshly cut stems. Someone prepared a concentrated dose, likely to coat the teapot. "And then there's this." She held up the rose-shaped key, watching their faces closely. "Sir Reginald left a note about a thorn of betrayal. He suspected someone here." Bertram's face reddened. "You're accusing us? I told you I threw out that vial Mrs. Baxter found, and I don't know anything about keys or poison." His voice rose, but his eyes darted to the bottle, betraying unease. Hargrove cleared his throat. "That bottle could belong to anyone. Foxglove grows wild. Anyone could have plucked it. I'm a doctor, not a gardener. I'd have no need to brew my own." Mills clasped his hands, his knuckles white. "I've never touched foxglove. My duties are to the soul, not poison. But Sir Reginald did seem troubled that day, muttering about trust." Miss Marple noted their defences, each deflecting blame, yet none fully convincing. She recalled a case where a group's denials had unravelled when pressed together, their lies tangling like threads. "Let's consider the moment the teapot broke," she said. "Reverend, you saw Bertram's hand near it. Dr. Hargrove, you pronounced the death without an autopsy. And Bertram, you took a vial that's now missing. Small actions, but they weave a troubling picture." The room grew tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Eliza stepped forward, her voice sharp. One of you knows more than you're saying. Uncle's journal named you all B.H.M. Why did he fear betrayal? Bertram stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. This is nonsense. I'm not sitting here to be interrogated by an old spinster and a grieving girl. He stormed toward the door, but Miss Marple's voice stopped him cold. Running won't solve the riddle, Mr. Hawthorne, she said calmly. The truth is close, and it will find you. Bertram hesitated, then sank back into his chair, his defiance crumbling. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles, his face unreadable, while Mills stared at the floor, murmuring a prayer. Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together their reactions with the evidence. The digitalis, the key, the journal, all pointed to a calculated act, but the motive remained just out of reach. As the group sat in uneasy silence, Miss Marple folded her hands. We'll meet again soon, she said. There's one more place to look, the Teapot's origins. Eliza, let's visit the village antique dealer tomorrow. He may know why it was so special. The men left one by one, their footsteps echoing in the hall. Eliza turned to Miss Marple, her eyes wide. They're hiding something, aren't they? Indeed, Miss Marple replied, her voice steady. But secrets like weeds can't stay buried forever. Chapter 9. The Antique's Tale. The narrow streets of St. Mary Mead glowed with the soft light of a crisp morning as Miss Marple and Eliza made their way to the village antique shop. A quaint storefront with a sign reading, Waverley's Curiosities. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, greeted by the musty scent of old wood and polished brass. Shelves brimmed with relics, clocks, vases, faded paintings. But Miss Marple's focus was on the teapot's history, hoping it might reveal why it was chosen as the instrument of Sir Reginald's demise. Mr. Waverley, a stooped man with a shock of white hair, peered over his counter, his eyes bright with curiosity. Miss Marple, Miss Hawthorne, what a pleasure! Come for a treasure, have you? He said, wiping his hands on a dusty apron. We're here about the Hawthorne family teapot, Miss Marple said, her voice warm but direct. The one that broke at the manor. It was an heirloom, I understand. Can you tell us anything about its origins? Mr. Waverley's face lit up, delighted by the challenge. Oh, the Hawthorne teapot, a fine piece, late 18th century, porcelain from a small English kiln. I appraised it for Sir Reginald years ago. It had a unique feature. A false bottom, you know, for hiding valuables. Smugglers used such things back then, but the Hawthornes cherished it for sentiment. Said it held family secrets. Eliza's eyes widened. A false bottom. Could something have been hidden inside it? Quite possibly, Mr. Waverley replied, adjusting his spectacles. The base was sealed tight, but a clever hand could open it with a twist. Sir Reginald never mentioned finding anything, but he was cagey about that teapot. Always kept it locked in a cabinet, except for special occasions. Miss Marple's mind sparked at the revelation. A hidden compartment could explain why the teapot was targeted. Perhaps it held something worth killing for. Something Sir Reginald's journal hinted at with its talk of betrayal. She recalled a case where a locket's secret chamber had concealed a will, and she wondered if the teapot's contents had sparked the fatal plot. Did Sir Reginald ever ask you about opening it? Miss Marple asked, her tone gentle but probing. Mr. Waverley shook his head. Not directly, but last month he came in, asking about antique locks and keys. Said he'd found a curious key at the manor, shaped like a rose. I told him such keys often opened hidden panels in old furniture or objects. He seemed unsettled, like he'd stumbled onto something he didn't expect. Eliza gripped Miss Marple's arm. The rose-shaped key from the study. It must connect to the teapot. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts racing. The key, the false bottom, the digitalis laced shards, all suggested someone knew the teapot's secret and wanted it destroyed, along with Sir Reginald. But what was hidden? A letter, a jewel, or evidence of a deeper scandal? Thank you, Mr. Waverley, Miss Marple said, her voice steady. One last thing. Did anyone else inquire about the teapot recently? Bertram, Dr. Hargrove, or Reverend Mills, perhaps? The shopkeeper stroked his chin. Now you mention it, Dr. Hargrove stopped by a few weeks ago, asking about old porcelain, said he was researching for a patient's collection, but he lingered over my teapot display, curious about hidden compartments. Didn't think much of it then. As they left the shop, the bell chiming behind them, Eliza's face was taut with excitement. Hargrove again! He knew about the teapot's secret, didn't he? It's possible, Miss Marple said, her eyes distant. But we need proof. The teapot shards are our best clue. Let's return to the manor and examine them again. Perhaps we missed a piece of the false bottom. The village bustled quietly around them as they walked back, the weight of the mystery growing heavier. Miss Marple's mind wove together the clues. The scratched porcelain, the poison, the key, and now a hidden compartment. The riddle was nearing its heart, and she sensed the final truth lay just beyond the next discovery, waiting to be unlocked. Chapter 10. The Riddle Unravelled. The drawing room of Hawthorne Manor was bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon, its long table set once more, but this time with only the shattered remnants of the antique teapot. Carefully arranged on a cloth, Miss Marple stood at the head, her knitting bag at her side, her eyes sharp and steady as she faced Bertram, Dr. Hargrove, Reverend Mills, and Eliza, all seated in tense silence. The air crackled with anticipation, as if the manor itself knew the moment of truth had arrived. The rose-shaped key, Sir Reginald's journal, and the glass bottle from the shed rested beside the shards, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. "Thank you all for coming," Miss Marple began, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of certainty. "The riddle of the broken teapot has puzzled us, but its pieces, literal and figurative, have finally come together. Sir Reginald's death was no accident, and today we'll uncover the why and the who." She lifted a teapot shard, its scratched surface glinting. This teapot, an heirloom with a false bottom, held a secret worth killing for. Its deliberate scratches ensured it would shatter, spilling digitalis, a poison distilled from foxglove, into the tea or onto Sir Reginald's hands, triggering his fatal collapse. His journal named 3 suspects, B, H, M, and warned of betrayal. "Let's piece it together." Bertram shifted, his jaw tight. "This is absurd. I loved my uncle. Why would I harm him?" Dr. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles. His voice clipped. "I told you the digitalis was medicinal. An overdose, perhaps, but not my doing." Reverend Mills clasped his hands, his voice trembling. "I sought only to comfort, not to harm. Surely you don't suspect me?" Miss Marple's gaze moved from one to the next, her mind weaving the clues. The scratched teapot, the vial in the shed, the cut foxglove, the rose-shaped key, and the antique dealer's revelation. "The teapot's false bottom was key," she said. "It hid a document, a codicil to Sir Reginald's will, discovered when he found the rose-shaped key in an old desk. The codicil changed the estate's inheritance, diverting it from Bertram to Eliza, citing Bertram's reckless debts. Sir Reginald planned to reveal it at the tea party, but someone ensured he never would." Eliza gasped, her eyes wide. "Me? But I didn't know." "Precisely," Miss Marple said. "You were unaware, but someone else knew. Someone who stood to lose everything." She turned to Bertram. "You brushed the teapot that day, as Reverend Mills saw. You took the vial Mrs. Baxter found, claiming it was discarded. Yet another was found in the shed with digitalis residue, alongside small gloves that fit neither you, nor Hargrove, nor Mills." Bertram's face paled, but he remained silent. Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. "Dr. Hargrove, you supplied digitalis, claiming it was for Sir Reginald's heart, but your reluctance to share records and your interest in the teapot's hidden compartment suggest you knew more. Reverend Mills, your prayers hid a nervous heart, and you saw Bertram's actions but stayed silent. Perhaps out of fear." She paused, then turned to the door, where a figure had entered unnoticed, Mrs. Baxter, the maid, her face ashen. "But the true culprit," Miss Marple said, "is someone we overlooked. Mrs. Baxter, you swept up the shards, But you also handled the teapot before it broke. You knew its secret from years of service. And you were in the garden, cutting foxglove with those small gloves. You prepared the digitalis, scratched the teapot to break, and coated it with poison, knowing Sir Reginald's habit of pouring tea himself. Mrs. Baxter's hands trembled, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for him to die. I only wanted to scare him, to delay the codicil. Bertram promised me a share of the estate if I helped. He was desperate, drowning in debt, and I've served this family my whole life with nothing to show for it. Bertram lunged to his feet. Lies! I never— Sit down, Miss Marple said sharply. Your lies unravel, Bertram. You knew of the codicil from Sir Reginald's hints and enlisted Mrs. Baxter, promising her wealth. Dr. Hargrove supplied the digitalis, believing it was for a patient, but you, Mrs. Baxter, applied it. Reverend Mills saw enough to suspect but feared speaking out. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Why, Mrs. Baxter? You were like family, Mrs. Baxter sobbed, collapsing into a chair. I'm sorry, Miss Eliza. It was a moment of weakness. I never thought he'd die. Miss Marple's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. The law will decide your fate, but the truth is out. The teapot's riddle, its hidden codicil, its poisoned shards, has been solved. As the room fell silent, Miss Marple gathered her bag. Eliza, call the constable. Justice must follow truth. Later, as the sun set over St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple walked back to her cottage. The weight of the mystery lifted. The village would talk for years of the broken teapot, but for now, peace returned to its quiet lanes. If you've enjoyed this tale, grab a cup of tea, hit that subscribe button, and join us for more mysteries. Your support means the world to us.